And that's how it all starts, with a simple choice. Which side are you on? Up, down, good, evil, right, wrong, God or no God. It's simple, just pick. Boots, quick choose. Are you good or are you bad?
I'm neither.
Welcome to Bottle Episodes, a podcast where we discuss very special TV episodes or movies set in a single primary location. I'm CJ.
And I'm Courtney.
And today we are discussing the 2018 thriller Bad Times at the El Royale. It was written and directed by Drew Goddard, who did Cabin in the Woods, The Martian, Cloverfield, and it was released October 12th, 2018. And here's what it's about, Courtney.
Tell me.
In 1969, seven strangers converge at a hotel on the California-Nevada border, and before the night is over, secrets will be revealed, and all may not make it out alive.
Spooky.
Super spooky. It's a cheeky crime thriller packed with A-listers, rich with musings on morality and duality.
Yeah.
What was your experience watching this movie or rewatching this movie?
Well, I will go back to my original viewing of this film because I will say I walked into that theater and I was genuinely shocked that it was empty. Like it was a prime time, like Friday night, date night kind of situation. And I walked in and there was just nobody else there. There were maybe like two other people that were hanging out in the theater. And I was genuinely shocked. And now rewatching it, I still love it as much as I loved it the first time, but I must say, like, I understand what was going on with some of those reviews that, to me, were very surprising at the time when they came out.
OMG. I wasn't expecting you to say that. That is virtually the same experience that I had, where I saw it in 2018. I don't remember whether the theater was full or not, although we will definitely talk about how nobody saw this movie.
Yeah.
It was a bona fide box office bomb. At the time, I was evangelizing the movie. I called it the best movie I had seen of that year. Okay.
And what's crazy to me is, just as a quick sidebar.
Yes, please.
You and I are very good friends. We have been friends for quite some time. I don't recall us ever actually talking about this movie.
Did we not debrief about this movie? Because it wasn't until we were like planning out this season of Bottle Episodes where one of us suggested Bad Times and the other person was like, oh my God, yes, I'm obsessed with that movie.
Yes. And that's great. So even the people who saw the movie were not talking about it, even amongst themselves. Which is bonkers.
We decided on some kind of unspoken pact of silence. But the part that eerily matches your experience is the part where I revisited it for this taping that we're doing. And I was like, I kind of see what they were talking about.
Yes.
I was fully expecting to show up to be like the naysayer and you'd be the one being like, no, it's so cool. It's perfect. And then we would have a nice little debate. But it sounds like both of us are going to contend with our own feelings of loving this movie, but also admitting some of its shortcomings.
Listen, this film, my relationship to this film is such that I saw it across the room. I fell madly in love with it. And we decided to build a relationship. And now I'm seeing it for who it truly is. And I still love it. I still think this relationship should keep going. I still want to be in it with this movie. So that's where I'm at.
The honeymoon phase might be over, but the love is still there.
Still growing, still learning, still growing. I see it for what it is, and I love all of its flaws.
Well, I'm going to start by talking about the things that I still love.
Okay, good.
It is a movie that thinks in comic book panels. It feels very much like a graphic novel.
For real. It actually, yes, 100%.
Which I adore.
I co-sign.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's hyper designed, but in a fun way. It feels very architectural. It's punchy. There's a lot of choreography. There's no dancing. There's a lot of music, but there's a lot of coordination.
Exactly.
Tell me what you love about this movie.
So, you know me, I'm won over by a very pretty movie very easily. And this film is stunning. It's gorgeous. The set decoration is there. The costuming is there. I will even give a shout out to, and this, I don't think this is a spoiler. There's a point at which one of the characters removes her wig and it's very, very like evocative of her of her vulnerability in that moment. I was like, yeah, no, I'm with that. I love that now that we are including more Black female protagonists, wig removal has become a trope. But I also really, really just I'm fascinated by, and as you know, obviously the source of this podcast, the truth of this podcast is that we're examining bottle episodes and specifically fixing in on a location. This film nails that, even though we deviate from the actual location. It is such a presence in the film that they really, really manage to keep us locked into that hotel, even when they take us out of it, with one notable exception, and I will save that for our later analysis.
Yes, I think I know exactly what you're talking about. That is an excellent segue into these little behind-the-scenes facts that I collected.
We love a trivia.
I bought the Blu-ray for this recording. There is a half-hour behind-the-scenes documentary.
Okay, fabulous.
And that was chock full of information. I also pulled from a very extensive interview from The Hollywood Reporter with the writer-director Drew Goddard. So there were sources, but like as opposed to our more recent movies, like Buried and Panic Room, I had to go a lookin'.
Yeah.
I had to go digging.
So you know how I love a good YouTube spiral. I love going and watching the reactions. I love all that kind of stuff, right? It was very hard to find analysis. Like just video essays from people on this. I was very like surprised. This movie feels like it would be perfect fodder for like YouTube people to like spiral down on, and they just didn't. No one watched this movie.
Exactly. Yes. There's so much like coded imagery and symbolism.
Yes.
Clearly, the writer, director, the producers, they wanted this movie to be dissected, and the fandom kind of. They took a look at it and they said, nah, I'm good.
They said, here's just a GIF of Chris Hemsworth's abs.
Right. I will say that part of it, and I'll get to my behind the scenes stuff in a second, but part of it is because the movie is a little newer, right? It's 3.5 years old.
True.
And so some of those, some of that essaying shows up a little later, like maybe 5, 7, 9 years later.
That's a good point. But, you know, even like the initial I've just gotten out of the movie and I have to talk about it meta didn't show up anywhere, where people are kind of writing their theories and thinking about and talking about like, what does this character mean? Like all that kind of stuff. It's just nowhere. And it's crazy.
Right. But as little thought as we as a culture gave this movie, so much thought went into it, starting with that fabulous set. Because of these intensely choreographed oneers and camera moves, the geography established in the film ended up matching the actual way they built the set. Does that make sense?
That's
as
really
opposed
cool.
to the set being segmented, like, for example, a studio sitcom set.
Yeah.
You know, like the store will be here and then the living room will be right next to it. No, like they actually built the hotel as it appears in the movie.
That's awesome.
And
really
that includes
great.
like the parking lot, and that includes like the rain, the trees, everything.
I do love that there is a moment in the film where you actually watch someone count out the steps to kind of figure out like the length and the depth of where they are, and like, okay, something's not matching up here. And that's really, really cool that they were able to definitely do that with a physical set that matched what was reality.
I have to admit that it wasn't until like the third viewing that I understood what that character Jon Hamm was doing. I was like, oh, he's basically doing what Jodie Foster did in Panic Room.
Yes.
Where he's like, oh, the measurements don't match up.
Right, exactly. Yes, Jon Hamm, our Jodie Foster.
Yes. Like you noted, the color story is totally on point. So we're playing with duality, of course, in this movie. That is like such a key word this week. Half of the hotel is California, so that's like warm tones. The other half is Nevada, so that's cool tones like purples and silvers. There's no red. We're avoiding red except for that borderline.
Yes.
The jukebox that sits right on the border. And there's also red in the chandelier, which you can only see like when Rose is swinging from it. Another color that they avoided was green, and they saved that only until the end when Cynthia's character is singing her heart out. Yes.
Giving us that beautiful voice. Absolutely.
And then the other thing, I definitely want to touch on the cinematography because it's essential. This movie is very visually stunning. They shot it on anamorphic lenses, old anamorphic lenses from the 60s and 70s, just to get that like cinematic 60s, 70s look.
Nice.
There's so many wide shots, and the ceiling of the set was built down very, very low, which meant that we're in Citizen Kane territory where we're actually seeing the ceiling in a lot of these shots, which meant that the lights could not be just your garden variety studio lights. They had to be built into the set. So the cinematographer and production designer had to coordinate, and all of the lights, which we actually see in the movie, are actually functioning also as the cinematic lights, the movie lights.
Yeah, that's really cool. That was something that I think watching it again for the first time, because I did watch it, I ended up watching it multiple times just to make sure I was getting everything right. But yeah, the very first time, like there's that very first like opening shot where someone walks into a room and the camera's just sitting there in that one location. And it blew my mind that they were able to get that sort of like ambient light just coming from that ceiling that you can see. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, a very, very controlled environment. It's definitely artificial, and it feels like, I know that this is a big cliche, especially in this podcast, it feels like a play. It's very staged, but it also feels totally immersive because of those low ceilings, because of those lights that you can see, and because of the organic way that the actors move within it.
Mm-hmm. And it also gives us that sort of like dispassionate feeling as well, because we're just sort of observing, we're just watching this happen to these characters, and you're kind of like, wow, this just feels kind of like, for the moment, I mean, you know, there's nothing like watching Nick Offerman. He's amazing to watch, but you also kind of feel like this play is getting like a little bit boring, and then suddenly it's not boring.
Yes, exactly. There's that like big, you know, punctuation of violence, which feels very Tarantino-like. We'll get to the T word in a hot second. Okay. That is the big elephant in the room. We're going to tease the elephant. The elephant is Tarantino. But I do want to touch a little bit on like the development and the cast in order to make this movie, which is an example of a passion project, which sucks that it has like such a inauspicious ending, which is that nobody saw the movie. But it was a labor of love from Drew Goddard. He wanted to make something not based on any IP. What a concept. What a concept. His origin, or his seed inspiration, was the music. So it was music first. He was very inspired by all those 60s tracks, those Motown tracks, and he would just vibe off of the music and then start writing these scenes.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was very inspired by crime fiction, noir fiction, and he sort of sold everybody, the producer, the studio, Fox, and the cast, on his passion, so much so that people took pay cuts to be in this movie in order to keep costs down. And the way he framed it was that if we keep costs down, then Fox will sort of allow us to take these creative risks.
Man, that breaks my heart to hear. Oh, that breaks my heart.
It does, me too.
Oh God, because they didn't even make their, you know, investment back, like in terms of how much they made. Yeah, I think it was off by like $500,000 or something crazy. It was like they spent like $32 million and only got like 31.5 from the box office, which is crazy.
Last time we talked, Buried was made for $3 million, and it made $21 million at the box office. So it was like,
Success.
Great, keep costs low, try something crazy. They kept costs low, tried something crazy, and they couldn't even make that money back.
Man, it's mind blowing. I can't believe it.
Nevertheless, the cast was into it, especially Jeff Bridges. Mm-hmm. He said that he signed on because it is the kind of movie that he wanted to see, where you're on the edge of your seat. The filmmakers are ahead of you. And Jon Hamm, this is interesting, he was a last minute replacement because Russell Crowe backed out. Did you read this?
I did. And I'm trying to picture this movie with Russell Crowe.
Really, I think it would have been a completely different movie, because I think Jon Hamm really sets the tone at the top when he's giving that spiel in the lobby, right?
Yeah.
And we're getting a lot of the tone of the movie comes from him. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but we are talking about casting.
Yeah.
This guy is funny, but he's also kind of like sinister too. He's making these little like microaggressive digs at Cynthia's character. And so much of the conflicting tone lives in that character. And I don't think Russell Crowe just would have given us like Javert or something, right? He would have just played the darkness.
He would have played the darkness, and it definitely would have felt even more so like he was leaning into that like LA Confidential noir. Like, granted, it is a noir film, but like at the same time, we've got Jon Hamm, who's living up to his last name. He's having fun. He's buying into the kitsch of this place. He's like, you know, here I am swiping coffee, getting grumpy about the bellboy not showing up. Like, you kind of feel that very, very, things are going to go downhill pretty quickly. And I will say this too, in terms of the casting, I feel like that switch that does happen with his particular character, I personally feel that Jon Hamm would and was a lot more successful in that change than I think Russell Crowe would have been.
1000%. So that was definitely a happy accident, like great blessing. Jon Hamm was only given 24 hours to accept or reject the script, and then he had to be on a plane in 48 hours. And the reason he signed on was to work with Jeff Bridges. And I think that's how a lot of the cast of these 7 principal players ended up getting amassed was, you know, once Jeff Bridges was on board, Jon Hamm, then, or no, Jon Hamm was at the end. Then Dakota Johnson comes on. Everyone's like, oh, they're in the movie? Okay, I'm in. So it seemed like a lot of goodwill went into this right at the top.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to really quickly talk about a casting note that I feel like only 3 people caught, that Manny Jacinto is in this movie from The Good Place. And I love him and I love his face. And I'm very sad that he's like in it, but not really in it. And then I found out that I think Drew Goddard is like a executive producer or something.
Of The Good Place.
Of The Good Place. And I'm sure that conversation was literally like, hey man, do you want to be in this movie? And Manny was like, sure. Oh, Jeff Bridges is in it? Great.
I did not realize that he was in the movie until 20 minutes before we started taping this episode. And I was scrolling the IMDb. I was like, wait, are you kidding? That Manny Jacinto? And it's so funny. Even the people who wrote the Wikipedia article didn't realize that Manny Jacinto was in it because they were listing the people who showed up to the premiere. And they said the cast and crew of the film and Manny Jacinto amongst like the people who showed up just because they were friends of cast and crew. Like, no. He was in the movie.
No,
blink and you miss it, but he's in it.
He's got a mustache, but he's there. He's there.
There's also 2 other random TV-related cameos. One is William B. Davis, who played the cigarette smoking man in The X-Files. He plays the judge at Father Flynn's hearing. Oh. And the only reason that he showed up, I'm assuming, is because it was shot in Vancouver. And The X-Files was produced in Vancouver. Neat. And then good old Jerry from Parks and Rec. Right at the end. Right at the very end. Yeah.
And like, I remember being in the theater and being like, oh, hey, it's Jerry. Like, never once will I ever just think of him as the character. He will always forever be Jerry to me. And I feel bad about that, but I love him. And it's fine.
Exactly. And I think his appearance was just because of Drew Goddard's TV connections, Good Place connections, the Sherverse. Yes.
I do quickly want to note that, and I'm going to say this, and I feel like someone might try to take my black card away, but I was not familiar with Cynthia Erivo before this movie came out. And when they, in that trailer, and you and I were kind of talking about the trailer before we started taping today, I just remember the thing that pulled me in immediately was her voice. Like hearing, you know, you hear the pop version of the song, and then there's a point at which the trailer itself turns on a dime and it becomes more sinister, and you recognize, oh, this is not just, you know, a fun 60s romp, but it was just the power and the emotion in her voice that made me go, oh, I'm going to go see this, and I'm already going to love it. And I know that I'm going to love it. I'm hoping I'm not disappointed when I go see this movie. And I got to say, I am part of my devastation that this film did not do as well is because she was so great in it. And I really feel like this was probably maybe like, if this was, you know, back in the day, if this was back in the 60s or 70s, her name would have appeared as an introducing, you know? I mean, I know she's done films and stuff like that, but I think this was probably like from her team's perspective, this was going to be like her big star making moment. And I'm kind of frustrated that it didn't happen with this movie.
Same to all of the above. This was the first movie that I'd seen her in. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching the movie, being blown away by her. And then the next morning posting an Instagram story about how I'm still thinking of this movie and her performance in particular. Yeah. So it was everything. It was haunting. It was multifaceted. However, her character also relates to some big issues that I have with this film. So we will get to that for certain. Yes, but she herself was amazing. Mm-hmm. In terms of reception, Bad Times got 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it did well.
Yeah, it did pretty good.
People generally liked it.
I feel like the audience loved it a little bit more than some of the critics did, which is par for the course.
There are 3 main themes amidst all of the negative critical reception. They are that Bad Times at the El Royale is a Tarantino ripoff. That's
Ooh.
1. 2 is it's too damn long. Debatable.
We can
talk about that. Yep. And then the third common opinion is that the third act is a letdown. So we'll definitely talk about that when we get to Act 3. I don't know that we have to talk so much about like the Tarantino comparison. I guess I just wanted to bring it up because so many reviews mentioned it. What are your thoughts?
I'll be real. Like when I watched this movie for the first time, I did not think about that at all. I really didn't. I guess for me, the focus was that this was something I was seeing that was, like you said, new IP. I think for me, the thing that kept pinging in my mind was the fact that, you know, this was the same guy who had done Cabin in the Woods. So my brain kept going, okay, there's obviously layers upon layers that are happening here. There's all kinds of interesting twisties and turnies that are happening. As far as the like, oh, there's a cult and oh, there's violence and oh, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, Tarantino doesn't own cults. He doesn't own violence. He doesn't own any of that stuff. And if we're going to be really real, the kind of violence we're seeing here is intense, but not to the same like comedic shock value that we're seeing in Tarantino's films. So to me, this felt less, less gimmicky. I don't love Tarantino as much as most people. And to be honest, like if we're going to go down that road, I felt like even though this movie had camp, it did not have it to the same disaffected degree as Tarantino's films do. So my brain just did not make that connection. And I think I had just seen Hateful Eight. Like I feel like I had seen it like recently in comparison to when I saw this movie for the first time. So the fact that, you know, I started reading those reviews and they're like, it's a Tarantino ripoff. It just felt kind of like shorthand in a way, like an easy dismissive shorthand that you could come up with simply because Tarantino was on your mind in that moment.
Agree. Yes. Cosign on all of the above. He doesn't own a love of the 60s. He doesn't own love of film noir.
Right.
The only thing that I would add is that I think despite whatever similarities one might glean when watching the movie, the main difference, and probably the reason that you and I didn't really think of Tarantino when we were watching this movie, is because Tarantino feels very glib to me.
Yes.
In a good way and in limiting ways.
Yes.
Like, for better or worse, he's just glib. And you're going to have a good time watching people's heads explode, watching people shoot each other. It's just going to be fun. Right?
Exactly.
And the tone of this movie, I think, is more sincere. There are so many things that this movie does that Tarantino would never, ever do, that he would never want to do.
Exactly. There's a lot of openness and vulnerability in the characters that I just don't think that Tarantino could quite achieve in the same way. And I don't mean that in a slight kind of way. I think to your point, it's something he wouldn't want to do. It's not something he's interested in. But this film goes out of its way to try to bring those things to the fore.
Okay, great. Do you want to dive into the plot?
Let's do it. Let's go.
Oh, by the way, this plot synopsis was so difficult to untangle just because of the unusual plot structure.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. I feel like maybe this was like half of your day yesterday, just writing this plot synopsis, just because, like, man, this is a tangled web for sure. Tangled web.
It was starting to become a little conspiracy corkboard. Okay, but here we go, if you'll bear with me. In 1959, a man named Felix, played by Nick Offerman, checks into the El Royale, a seedy hotel built on the California-Nevada border near Lake Tahoe. He buries a bundle of cash in the floorboards of his hotel room before an unknown man shoots him dead. 10 years later, 4 guests arrive with suitcases and secrets. Jeff Bridges as genteel priest Father Flynn, Cynthia Erivo as struggling singer Darlene Sweet, Jon Hamm as chatty salesman Laramie, and Dakota Johnson as abrasive hippie Emily. Meek hotel manager Miles checks them in. In room 1, it is revealed that Laramie is not a salesman. He's an FBI agent sent to recover surveillance materials, but he's surprised to uncover an unsanctioned set of wiretaps and surveillance setups, including a secret hallway of one-way mirrors that allows hotel management to spy on guests. Laramie sees Darlene singing in room 5, Father Flynn tearing up the floorboards in room 4, and Emily holding a young woman named Rose captive in room 7. Thoughts related to Act 1?
Act 1 was, without a doubt, I think it's just the best part of the film, personally. I think the setup is done really, really well. And then it doesn't shy away from the fact that we're going to see these characters shift and change pretty dramatically throughout the film. I will say, just as a side note, as much as I love that trailer, and I do love that trailer with my whole heart, like it's one of my top favorite trailers ever made, I do kind of wish I had gone into it without having seen the trailer, because it does kind of ruin a little bit of the aspect where Father Flynn is concerned. But aside from that, I love this open. I love all of these people crashing together. I love that feeling of like, oh, this is that joke, you know, like a priest and a singer and a vacuum salesman all walk into a seedy motel and chaos ensues. Like, I really enjoyed that. And then, you know me, I love a little bit of mapping. Like, I enjoyed the mapping aspects of it as well, taking us down that terrible hallway where you start to realize how horrifying this is. Clearly, things are going to get unhinged very quickly. And I think it is beautifully executed in this Act 1.
Yes. I want to talk about like 5 different things at once right now. Let me try to manage it in my own brain. Okay, 1, I want to talk about the trailer since you brought it up. It is one of my all-time favorite trailers. Yes. I think anyone who remotely has an interest in editing, in montage, or maybe specifically trailer editing should study this trailer. It's so damn good. It makes very liberal use of image plus sound. So the Foley people or the sound effects people are working overtime specifically on this trailer. They make good use of the music. They make great use of gestures and close-ups.
Yes.
It's up there with 2 of my other favorite trailers, Closer from 2004 and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy from 2011. So if you want to have a little trailer film festival to yourself, watch those 3 trailers. They are amazing.
Yes.
As far as you saying that Act 1 is the best part of the movie, I think you are correct. And that is related to a bigger observation that I have, or an umbrella observation I have about the whole film, which is I think that the most ideal form factor for this story is a limited series, not a feature.
Oh, man, I agree with that 100%. Yes.
Because if we're saying that, wow, the setup is so great, like this was a really anticipated movie before it came out. Like people were like, oh my God, it's like Clue, but a little more noir. Like, I want to know more. We were all here for the setup. We were all here for 7 strangers with secrets show up to hotel, right?
Absolutely.
We were all here for like people like coming into this hotel wearing their archetypes on their sleeves and then going into their rooms and revealing their true selves, right? Very Agatha Christie. And I think that despite Drew Goddard's best efforts, because so much of the movie is intensely designed, not just from a visual or a sound perspective or an aesthetic perspective, but also from a narrative perspective. Like he thought through every scene. He really did. But that does not mean that it was perfect. And I think you just ran out of narrative space.
Exactly. I think they just ran out of time, and you can feel that, and we can talk about this later in the length of the film, but you can also feel it in the way that we get this beautiful setup, right? We get this beautiful, like, hey, this hotel exists in two spaces. You are in two spaces at once when you walk into this hotel. And ultimately, I feel like we get this wonderful, great explanation from Miles, where he's talking about the California side versus the Nevada side and what it all means. And narratively, I don't think we ever actually come to some sort of fulfillment with that particular point of setup. And I feel like, again, like if we had had more time with these characters and in this hotel, it could have come a little bit more full circle for what it means that this hotel is in two places at once. I do think that they make great use of the line in the center, that, you know, that moral in between space that they want to occupy within this story. But I feel like there was something else that we were reaching for that we didn't quite grasp with the conceit of this hotel being in two places at once.
I think I know what you mean. The first time I saw this movie, I had this thought that, okay, California and Nevada, the way the author, Drew Goddard, wants to position it is that California is the land of dreams, hope, or sunshine, or I think hope was Nevada. Dreams, sunshine, open air, and Nevada was hope, opportunity. See, I'm getting confused right now because you can say both about either.
Exactly.
Because Nevada is Las Vegas, it's Reno, and then California, of course, is like Hollywood, Los Angeles. Like both of them, both cities, both territories code in our collective consciousness as both sunny and with like a hidden underbelly, which of course, maybe if Drew Goddard were standing right here, he'd be like, that's exactly the fucking point, right? It's like these two places have two layers, but as it stands as sort of like a cinematic or storytelling symbol, it's just a little muddled.
Exactly. And I feel like even if you wanted to just do the pure black and white thing where Nevada encompasses Sin City in and of itself, it's this, you know, hellish place, but it's fun. My God, is it fun, right? And then you've got California on the other side that is, you know, sunshine and prosperity and fortune, but also there's something about the greed of that place. If you want it to go in those directions, sure, great, fine. I love that. But I don't know, we just didn't quite get there. And I don't know how or why that is the case. So that was one of the first things that started coming back to me in the rewatch of it, that this beautiful, wonderful setup didn't quite make it to its ultimate point, in my opinion.
I agree. And I think that just has to do with the duality of our reactions to this movie. That the first time you watch it, you're kind of intoxicated. And it's kind of like when you go out for coffee with like someone who purports to be really intelligent and you're like, oh my God, like we talked all night, like he had all these interesting things to say about philosophy, right? Yeah. But the more time you spent, or like when you start to like journal about this person's thoughts, you're like, wait a minute, hold on. No. All the dots did not quite connect.
Did you go to coffee with Billy Lee?
Yeah, right. Yes. Oh my God, is the movie Billy Lee? But I think that's really funny because I think the movie is Billy Lee, both intentionally and unintentionally. Billy Lee is the cult leader played by Chris Hemsworth, and we will get to him in a second. However, okay, so as much as we're putting a few bullet points in the con column, I do want to switch back over to the pro column and just give a particular shout out to this one that's featured in Act 1 when Jon Hamm is discovering the hidden corridor, and it's all one take. It took 8 months to plan.
Wow.
And it took 27 takes, and Cynthia Erivo sang live.
Oh my God.
She sang live.
Oh my God, her voice. I can't imagine.
Oh God, silky smooth voice. And to make sure that the audio was captured clean, the crew had to wear like padded shoes and knee pads and all of these things to make sure that they were traipsing around like little tiny mice, quietly arranging things by the time, you know, everybody hit their mark. So it is very impressive from a production standpoint. Act 2.
Act 2. Wait, before we dive into Act 2, I just really quickly want to shout out to Jeff Bridges, like standing like in the floorboards, like just staring at Cynthia Erivo singing. That's how I felt. I agreed. Yes, 100. I think that's so good. It was really beautiful. I love Jeff Bridges.
I love their relationship in this movie, which we will get to.
We will get to.
Okay. Act 2. Father Flynn and Darlene share pie in the hotel lobby. Darlene says that she's at the El Royale for a low-paying gig in Reno. The two bond at first, but Darlene catches Father Flynn attempt to drug her drink. She knocks him unconscious and leaves. Miles revives Father Flynn and asks him to absolve his past sins. Miles explains that the mysterious owners of the hotel force him to film the guests' indiscretions, including those of a now-deceased famous leader who once stayed at the hotel. After this leader showed Miles kindness, Miles hid the incriminating film reel instead of submitting it to his employers. Flynn realizes the film would be worth a large sum of money. Laramie attempts to intervene with Emily's kidnapping of Rose. Emily kills Laramie and injures Miles in the process, all of which Darlene witnesses. It turns out that Rose had joined a cult led by charismatic Billy Lee, played by Chris Hemsworth, and has murdered an innocent couple. Emily has taken her sister Rose from the cult in order to save her. Rose summons Billy Lee to the hotel. Darlene attempts to flee the hotel but fails. Flynn finds Darlene and explains to her that he's not a priest. He's a bank robber and he tried to drug her to gain access to her room to retrieve money put there 10 years ago by his brother Felix. She cooperates with his efforts to locate the money in exchange for half of it. They find the stash, but before they can leave, Billy Lee arrives and takes Flynn, Darlene, Emily, and Miles hostage in the hotel lobby. Thoughts related to Act 2?
So I don't know. I really, really love the development of that relationship between Father Flynn and Darlene, to the point where I almost had these moments of like, are they gonna date? Like, you know, like dumb. Like it was a dumb thought. I had it in the theater and I was like, no, Courtney, get rid of that. Your shipping goggles are on.
They have a chemistry. They have a chemistry. And if you want an intergenerational, interracial romance, I invite you to check out The Prom, where Keegan-Michael Key and Meryl Streep make a very convincing case for being a couple. So you're not wrong to think that there's some kind of like, they have a simpatico and they sell it on screen.
They really, I mean, I was genuinely, I think in the theater, I was genuinely taken aback because I was like, what is happening? like what is going on between these two? But it was genuinely lovely to watch the navigation between, very clearly this man is shady, but also something is going on with him psychologically. He probably has dementia or Alzheimer's or something is happening with him, which complicates this narrative even more. And I feel like in this second act, we really start to lean into what is going on with him in terms of his criminality versus is he paying for it? Not only did he pay for it in jail, but is he now starting to pay for it in terms of his well-being, his memory?
I want to just spoil all the reveals right now. So if you haven't seen this movie and you don't want spoilers, turn back now.
This is it.
In order to talk about what I want to talk about regarding Darlene's character.
Yes. Yes.
And I assigned little Dungeons and Dragons morality labels to all of these people because I suspect Drew Goddard did something similar. Okay. Father Flynn, he's our true neutral. And you can feel free to debate these. Please, if you have a different thought, let me know. Father Flynn, he's our true neutral. We think he's a priest. He's really a bank robber. Right. Emily, Summer Spring, chaotic good. We think she's an angry hippie. Mm-hmm. But then she turns out to be a kidnapper. But then she turns out to be the sister of a brainwashed cult member.
Right.
Laramie Sullivan, we think, or he's lawful neutral. We think he's a talkative salesman. He's actually an FBI agent. Rose Summerspring, chaotic evil. We think she's a kidnapped victim. She turns out to be a murderous cult member. And then she turns out, through her backstory, turns out she's a victim of abuse, along with her sister Emily. Mm-hmm. Miles, chaotic neutral. We think he's a wholesome bellhop. Turns out he's a drug addict who spies on guests for management. Turns out, spoiler for Act 3, he's a guilt-ridden Vietnam vet. Chris Hemsworth as Billy Lee, lawful evil. Lawful because he lives by a code. So that's why I thought that he wasn't chaotic. Debatable. Neutral evil? Okay.
I lean a little bit more towards neutral evil.
Okay.
For him.
Neutral evil.
Mm-hmm.
We meet him as a smooth talker on the beach. Turns out he's a sociopathic cult leader.
Yes.
Darlene sweet, neutral good. We think she's a singer trying to make it in the world. And she is.
No changes.
No changes. I feel like maybe that's what resonated with me the first time I saw it. Maybe that's what Drew Goddard was going for. Mm-hmm. And on a second watch, I just feel like that's kind of what makes her underdeveloped.
Yes.
So I want to unpack that.
Yeah, let's unpack her character a little bit. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this character. I did appreciate the attempt at, like, here's what the microaggressions are that she's experiencing. Like, obviously, there's a point at which we realize that our vacuum salesman is actually trying to alienate her in a way. So he's trying to alienate as many people as he can so people will leave him alone. But he's choosing...
Thank you for pointing that out, because that is what I was wondering. Like, I'm like, why is he being a dick to everybody? So that's a good, like, mind canon rationale. So thank you for that.
Yeah. That's my headcanon, that he's trying to alienate them. He's trying to be irritating enough that, like, no one wants to hang out with the chatty salesman. He's trying to get them to stay out of the room and away from him so he's not impeded in his work, right? But at the same time, it was really interesting to have the constant insinuation that she is perhaps selling herself. Like, that's the consistent thing that is coming up in those microaggressive situations, because she's got a bedroll and everyone's like, oh, well, you know what the bedroll means, right? And then what's really interesting is, of course, it kind of echoes and comes back into play with her story in the studio when we finally see her backstory, that, you know, perhaps someone was trying to get her to give some of her time so she can improve her career, which horrifying. But at the same time, it's just kind of like she spends so much time being the emotional laborer for a lot of this story that it then kind of took me in a different direction, where I was like, I don't know what we're doing with this. Like, does she have to be this person? Does she have to do the emotional labor and do all the heavy lifting and bear the weight of Father Flynn's mental decline? Does she also have to be the person who has to kind of compel people to do the right thing? And we can talk about that in the third act a little bit more, but compel people to do the right thing in order to make sure that we get out of this okay. She ends up being more of a moral center. And I don't know, maybe I'm just ready for more morally gray Black female characters, but that to me felt a little bit like a cop-out. Like, people are still very nervous to go to the morally gray place with Black characters.
Right. 1,000%. I love saying 1,000%. Put it on a t-shirt.
It's better than 100, you know? Like
100. Yeah, right. 1,000. Okay.
1,000.
1,000, Courtney. Yes. I feel the same way. When we get to her backstory, what are the secrets that she's harboring? Well, right. She was harassed and intimidated by a music producer, but that has nothing to do with her. Right. She has no shame in that. There's no guilt there. So right. I think that maybe the author is confusing these bad things that happen to her, these microaggressions, these intimidations, these mistreatments as secrets. And they're not. It's not a morally gray thing. When you get microaggressed, that doesn't gray your moral compass.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I think, too, there's also a conflation with her economic standing with what her morality is going to do based on that. There's this whole thing about, hey, I am, as a record producer, making $200 an hour and you're only making $12 a session. Like, it's very clear she's not making a lot of money. And I feel like there was that desire to get ahead of the fact that she was going to partake in some good old-fashioned robbery money. How do we justify that? How do we make that okay? And we have to make that okay by having her getting microaggressed left, right, and center.
Right. And then that's the other thing, too. Is it that she's morally gray because she takes the money?
At this point, it just really comes off as her just like helping this nice old man, and he's giving her some money out of his wallet. Like, that's basically how it feels. Like, she's
right. There's no darkness there.
I'm gonna sing cover so you can, hit the chisel to get the floorboards open, and then you give me a little reward money for helping you out.
Yeah, and she didn't have much of a choice in that moment either.
Right.
Because they were trapped, they were stranded.
Yeah.
People were getting killed left and right. So
Like, what is she going to do? Say no? Like, there's a woman with a shotgun walking around behind the glass. Like, what is she going to do? Like, she's witnessed a murder. Her car has been dismantled. Like, she has no options at this point, and we can't call her morally gray for just having to survive in that moment.
When you state your need, your craving to have more morally gray Black characters, that reminds me of one of my favorite shows from last year, The White Lotus, because the hotel manager, also about a hotel, the hotel manager played by Murray Bartlett is one of the best TV characters I've seen in recent years because he's written by a gay man, Mike White, and he is a messy, fucked up character.
So messy.
I think that when you show people with underrepresented identities being flawed, being insanely flawed, then you show them as human. And I think that it's totally valid for us to point this out in a movie about people and their flaws.
Exactly. I mean, even her name, like, I don't want to pick on this too much, but her name is Darlene Sweet, which is a great
totally
stage
intentional,
name,
I'm sure, right?
by the way. Great stage name, totally intentional.
Right.
But it didn't have to be that way. I would have loved it if we found out that was just a stage name and that it wasn't her real name.
Exactly.
Like, even that would have provided that duality that we are getting in so many characters. I think that's the problem. There's no duality with her.
There's no duality for her.
With everybody else except her.
If I were to give notes on this, like a studio executive, I would actually say, hey, man, look, you're close.
Right.
If you want to write Darlene as the ultimately morally good person, I'm not asking you to change that.
Right.
Like, she can still be sweet.
Exactly.
She can still be sweet, uppercase and lowercase s, but just give her some kind of secret.
Anything. Like, I would even accept, and oh God, please continue to be my friend, and please continue to
this is a safe space
podcast with me, CJ. I would even accept if she had ended up taking that horrifying deal from
the music producer,
yes, and harboring some sort of, like, this is a choice that I made that I am dealing with.
I think so,
and now I have to, like, manage that feel. Like, I have to manage that. Like, I would even
that's not so controversial, I don't think. I'm with you there in terms of, like, ooh, I don't know if that's a narrative bullseye, but I think that why not? Let's try it. I would have at least tried it. Right, it gives her something. You know, one could argue that she did. We could play headcanon with that.
Yeah, we could. And maybe she did accept it. And, like, as a result, she still finds herself in a situation where she is unable to get to the place where she wants to be in her career.
Right.
I would accept that 100.
By the way, do you know who Xavier Dolan is?
Okay, so I know the name. He's the Phil Spector guy, right? Like, he's the...
Yes, he's the music producer.
The bad record exec, yeah.
He is this celebrated young gay filmmaker from France.
Oh, okay.
And I think that his big splash was I Killed My Mother. And that, I know, very dramatic French title. So behind the scenes, he's a total auteur. And then sometimes he shows up in these random on-screen roles. He was also in It Chapter 2. I didn't see it, but he plays one of Pennywise's unfortunate, or he plays a victim.
Oh, it's like the start of the movie. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Right.
Oh, God. Okay.
So he's kind of a chameleon. He's always doing interesting things in front of and behind the scenes. And like Manny Jacinto, it wasn't until I saw the IMDb cast list that it clicked for me. I was like, what? Drew Goddard is friends with everybody.
You know, it's all the people.
Right. Okay, so if we want to add a little bit of narrative richness, we'll just have to surmise what may or may not have happened between Cynthia and Xavier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess too, and sorry to switch just really quickly over here. There's a thought for me here that I know we've been talking a lot about, like, the morality and the choices that people are making. I am thinking too about the different kinds of freedom that people are needing in their particular lives, like with our hippie, whose name always escapes me and I feel really bad, Rose, and
Emily.
her sister Emily. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With Emily, obviously, it's very clear. She wants to free her sister of this abusive cycle that she seems to be in. And she's willing to do anything to make that happen. And even the freedom of literally her sister not going to prison for committing a murder, right? Then we have, the freedom of Jeff Bridges' Father Flynn being able to like get out of jail and then free himself of the guilt of what happened to his brother, right? And now we have this situation where we have freedom for Miles to absolve himself of all of the sins that he feels he's accumulated over his life. And then, of course, last but not least, we now have our main character. I'm going to call her the main character because I think she's the main character because she's supposed to be like the morally upright one in all of this. And she's delivering these beautiful speeches, which we'll talk about in Act 3. Mm-hmm. For her, the freedom that she needs is freedom from being under the thumb of this record company, the ability to be able to be financially secure enough that she can pursue the things that she wants to pursue. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying all this to say that, like, if we wanted to say that there was some kind of flavor here, I would have to go to the freedom place, America place, just to kind of get to a place where I feel comfortable enough to say that, like, okay, there is some duality here. She's trying to reach out for this particular freedom in the same way that these other characters are, and therefore she has some development. But that feels kind of like a reach. So for you to say, hey, she needs some development here, I'm 100%. I am 1,000% on board.
I think that Drew is consciously, actively grappling with the choices that these characters are forced to make. Mm-hmm. For example, Miles and his Vietnam backstory, right? Mm-hmm. He harbors this intense guilt over it. Yeah. But it was his job. It was his duty to God and country. Who knows how he ended up there, right? Who knows how wait a minute. No, he was drafted, right? So he really didn't have a choice. Yeah. And yet he's reaping the emotional consequences. Right. So I think that there is something there. And I want to give credit where credit's due. But I think that where we really felt it with Miles, with his struggle between morality and the choices that he's forced to make. Yeah. Why do we have to intuit so much with Darlene?
We have to dig. We have to dig pretty hard,
right,
to get to that answer.
We really have to pry those floorboards. Okay. You ready to take it home?
Let's bring it home. Let's go.
Act 3. In flashbacks, Billy preaches to his cult about the dangers of society's simplistic binary concepts, like good and evil, like right and wrong. Back in the present, Billy finds the incriminating film reel of the famous leader and interrogates his group of hostages about it. He forces Miles and Emily to play a life and death game of roulette, which Emily loses. Bill kills Emily. Flynn attacks Billy, and a fight breaks out amongst the group. The hotel catches on fire. Darlene implores Miles to help. There's some of that emotional labor. It's revealed that Miles is a Vietnam vet who had killed 123 people. Miles kills Billy. A distraught Rose stabs Miles. Flynn kills Rose. Though she knows he's not a priest, Darlene asks Father Flynn to give the dying Miles the absolution he seeks. Father Flynn does so before the surviving pair burn the film reel, take the money, and flee the hotel. Sometime later, Flynn visits his friend Darlene as she performs at a nightclub in Reno. Mm-hmm. The end.
The end.
I guess for starters, we can talk about Billy Lee's philosophy. Mm-hmm. What I found interesting, even though we've seen this time and time again, but I'm always a sucker for it, he's supposed to be something of a Thanos, where he uses his violence to express his philosophy, and that makes him inherently the villain, but you sense that the author agrees with him. I think
that's interesting.
Yeah, he has this speech where he's like, here's why society is lying to you.
We live in a society.
We live in a society, right? Black, white, right, wrong, good, evil. But society traps us into these binaries, and then the people with the real power can steal from us. Very similar to a lot of movies and a lot of stories, but for some reason, the first movie that comes to my mind is Parasite.
Oh,
you know, this idea that like we, the people in power pit people against each other. They trick them into thinking that there's only two choices. Yeah. And then, you know, we're distracted by choice A and B. And then meanwhile, they're over here living it up in the C-suite, so to
eating ramen don. Yeah.
So I found that was intriguing. I didn't really have a thought other than, okay, it's theme time, but it's coming from the villain, and that's always a fun choice.
Here's his speech. Yeah, no, I definitely, the vibe I get off of Billy is I do enjoy like the sinister nature of his setup, but I also do enjoy the fact that he is kind of an idiot. Like the movie does not set him up for success in terms of us like believing in his philosophy in any way, shape, or form, which I appreciated, because we see him making a lot of hypocritical choices, which I think is the point. We see him, you know, talking about, you know, don't make these binary choices. This is dumb. But then he is asking people to bank their lives on these black and white choices. And he makes them participate whether they want to or not. And then, of course, when he's getting called out on like whatever is going on with him, because it definitely feels like there's some level of trauma or panic, like the way he just so quickly went to the I don't like priests place, that my brain immediately went, clearly this man has some sort of religious trauma and is now like, I'm going to take that and make it my superpower. So it was just really interesting to watch him get so deflated when Darlene just rips him to shreds, which I enjoyed immensely.
We can definitely talk about the monologue of the century.
Let's talk about that monologue, man. Like,
she says,
I've seen it enough. I'm not even mad about it anymore. I'm just tired. I'm just bored with men like you. You think I don't see you for who you really are? A fragile little man, preying on the weak and lost.
Yeah, well,
I've heard it. And I don't care. I'd rather sit here and listen to the rain.
I really enjoyed that weariness of like, this is not new to me. This is my experience every day and I'm tired of it. So if you're going to kill me, just kill me, right? I enjoyed seeing him dismantled as like, he isn't treated, he's not given like the Joker treatment where he's like, he's right. Or even to paraphrase you earlier, Thanos, you know, like they don't give him the Thanos was right treatment. They don't give him the Joker has a point treatment. They give him the you're just a dude with your shirt off trying to prey on young girls to get them to follow you because that's just what you want to do. And you enjoy the power of this dynamic.
Yes. The Thanos comparison is incomplete upon further reflection and hearing you talk. Well, because he's self-serving. Okay, I'm gonna call out the obvious thing in the room, which is that the monologue is about Trump. You don't.
Is about
Trump.
What?
President Trump? 45.
Oh,
because like it took me a second to realize this time when I watched this movie this week, and she starts with the monologue, I thought it was curiously phrased.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, no, then, darling, you ain't understanding what's on this film.
Let me guess. It's some man who talks a lot. He talks so much that he thinks he believes in something. And really, he just wants to fuck who he wants to fuck.
I liked the monologue, but I thought it was curiously phrased. And then I thought, oh, right, it's 2018, written in 2016, 2017, smack dab in the middle of the Trump era. And this movie wasn't the only one doing this kind of grappling with like what we have become.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's incredible. Yeah.
So I think that the reason I say that the Thanos comparison is incomplete is because leaders like Trump and fictional leaders like Billy Lee, they're ultimately in it for themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, well, it's been a hot minute since I've seen Endgame. I don't think that Thanos had an ego, did he? Am I wading into like murky territory here?
No. Sorry,
I don't think Thanos was a Trump. That's what I'm getting at.
I don't know. I feel complicated about that Because ultimately he is coming from an ego place. Like, this is the solution.
I guess you could argue like a lot of villains do. Yeah, like most villains do.
Most villains do. However, I think I understand your point. He genuinely believes in that worldview. He genuinely believes that this is the right thing to do.
Yes, exactly.
To set the universe back to a place where everybody is in a better spot.
And I think that that's what Darlene was pointing out when she says, you think you believe in something, but you just want to fuck who you want to fuck.
Right, exactly.
I think that that's the difference between Billy Lee and Trump in one corner, and then villains like Killmonger and Thanos in another corner.
Right. And then two, of course, this, to go back to our, question about Darlene and our headcanon of her, obviously this is a conversation that she's also having with herself about that record producer. Ultimately, he went to that place of like, I have the power and the authority here. You go ahead and make your choice, but it's not really a choice. I'm asking you to do what I want to do. And I'm just going to talk at you until you do the thing that I want you to do. And very clearly, according to the script, she makes the choice not to pursue that.
Yes, exactly. I do want to talk about the third act and whether it works or not, just because so many reviews kind of harped on the fact that everyone was let down by the ending, right? And maybe implicitly we expressed that as well, because we said that the first act was the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
I want to start out by saying that I think that Drew Goddard's television instincts are bubbling to the fore here, for better or worse. He has like a television-sized cold open to start the movie.
Yes, he does.
And then each time I watch this movie, I think the same thing. Even the first time I saw this movie in 2018, I thought this, when like all hell breaks loose. Yeah. That is a very Buffy, WB, Fox, ABC kind of move, right?
Yeah.
A set piece for the third act that's very like, and then everyone just starts punching each other, right? That to me felt very television, for better or worse, because obviously I love that kind of thing. But it's not maybe the most inherently cinematic, and it won't win you any favors with critics. So I understand what they're saying as well.
Yeah, the pacing just gets completely shot in that third act. Monologues, as beautiful as they are, some of them are just dragging on too long, and then the sudden percussive violence doesn't necessarily meet the level of emotionality that's happening in the scene. Everything's on fire. I
also, just to rewind a little bit before all hell breaks loose, I do think that Drew starts to get a little obsessive with answering every single question.
Yes.
Did you notice some of the dialogue was just like, well, what about this? Well, why did you come back? Well, why did you want the money when you have the film right here? And I'm going to call it right now. We did not need to check all those boxes. Leave some of those boxes unchecked.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to talk about something else that is in relation to that. The mystery of who is on the film.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Because I feel like a lot of what I was seeing and what little analysis I could find, a lot of people who got like really obsessed with that like one unanswered question, not necessarily understanding that it's okay to not have that answer.
Did they think that it needed to be answered?
I don't think it needed to be answered. And to be perfectly honest, I think that the mystery is kind like you said, the movie, even though it wants to give you that mystery, it is still kind of telling us who was on that tape. It's telling us. It told us when we saw the image of Marilyn in the opening in the lobby. Like we
it's
know,
one of three people. It's JFK, it's RFK, or it's MLK.
Or it's MLK.
I think you're opening up a lot of can of worms if it's MLK.
Oh God. Oh my God. Right? Oh my God. But yes. Yeah.
I think that the most straightforward answer is that it's JFK.
Exactly right. Like they make all the comments. They're like, hey, he's dead. Hey, people, the memory of him is really important. Blah, 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 blah. All this, that, and the other. With the timing, with why the FBI is in the building, like you can put it together real quick. Okay, it was JFK. Fine.
I thought that was effective, leaving that as a nice little mystery for us.
Yeah, I thought it was fine that it was a nice little mystery, and I wanted them to keep that as the mystery. But like, I definitely feel like the breadcrumbs that were left were even still a little bit more on the hey, here's the answer, guys side of things.
So you're saying that they could have scaled back even more regarding that film reel.
Right. Okay. They could have. I think this story has enough going for it that many, many mysteries could have been left to a little bit more ambiguity.
Let's talk about the running time. 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it feels like that.
It really does.
It does.
Oh my God. Yeah.
If you bear with me, I want to read a quote from The Hollywood Reporter from Drew Goddard. So the question was, with Bad Times, there was a test screening that was too short. And Drew says, yep, and our scores went way down. On a movie like Bad Times, you don't want to be held hostage to scores. The studio was great about it, but it was very clear that the audience did not invest in the characters the same way. It's one of the scenes where people talk. If you cut those scenes in half, suddenly the surprises didn't work because the setup didn't work. There were little things like that that were interesting to see, so you had to find the right rhythm of the movie. It's always hard. You have to fail in order to get the right length. You have to come up with the wrong length for a while. End quote. I appreciate that he fought for things. I appreciate that he wanted to keep character development intact, right? Because there are obviously many, many scenes that could have been trimmed down that are just based on character backstories or certain emotions, even certain glances. So I like that he fought for those things. I definitely feel he could have cut at least 10 minutes and the net effect would have been the same.
I agree with that. When I was talking a little bit more about ambiguity earlier, I think I was actually kind of talking about what we ended up seeing with Miles.
Yes.
I feel like there was room to leave his backstory a little bit more ambiguous.
We didn't need to go to Vietnam.
We didn't need to go to Vietnam.
It was an indulgence, especially because
it was.
Like, when he's talking about his past sins, his past sins of spying on guests is plenty.
Yeah, he's racking them up. He's got plenty. He's got, whatever he's feeling about his addiction, whatever he's feeling about his, spying on guests and all that kind of stuff. Like all these things are happening to him. But still, we even had room for the Vietnam storyline. We just didn't have to go there.
Right.
It could have been very clear that the reason why the addiction is happening is probably a mix of what happened in Vietnam, but also what was happening to him in that hotel as well. So I feel like if we cut maybe some of that out, we maybe wouldn't be talking about almost a 2 hour and 20 minute runtime.
Drew Goddard in these interviews talks about bold creative choices. Those are the kinds of things he's talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Like all these like backstory cutaways that almost feel like mini movies in and of themselves. Organizing the pacing according to character, which I think that's another reason why people compare it to Tarantino, because that structure is very Pulp Fiction-like. But I think that those are the quote unquote risks that he's referring to. And I'm like, maybe they didn't pay off. Yeah. Maybe we could have luxuriated in this world of this seedy hotel and you didn't need, maybe all of this narrative organization was just like frippery at the end of the day.
It definitely feels that way by the time you get to that very last flashback.
But so that I'm not being so dismissive.
No, you're
this
good.
kind of ties back to my point that maybe this narrative would have been better as a limited series, because then if we did have the Miles episode, if we did have the Emily and Rose episode, it would not have felt disjointed at all.
Exactly. And I feel genuinely that all of the backstories we got were great. It's kind of like, it's like that last bite of cake that gets you sick. Like you're doing great, you're feeling good, you're enjoying it, and then suddenly you get to that last bite and you're like, oh no, a mistake was made here. I may have overdone
one morsel too far.
Yes. Yeah, just one morsel too far.
I do want to give a randomly timed shout out because I forgot to mention it earlier. Miles is played by Lewis Pullman, who's Bill Pullman's son.
Yes.
And of course, the second you hear that, you're like, of course. Those winsome eyes, that wavy hair, I can totally see it.
There it is.
And I will say, when you were saying that we're certain that Cynthia's team thought that this was her big and introducing, I also feel like maybe this was a big quinceañera for Lewis Pullman as well. And I looked him up. He was in the Catch-22 miniseries, so he's doing stuff. Right. But a lot of the recent stuff is still like short film. Okay. So I'm rooting for him. We're all rooting for him.
We're all rooting for you. Not in the same tone as Tyra Banks, but we are actually rooting for you.
Yes.
Just as a sidebar, I'm glad you brought that up because he was really good. I thought
So
he did
good.
a great job in this. You know, it's sort of like nervous Nelly, nervous Tick. He's having a hard time, but he also comes across as like a very earnest boy from Indiana from the 60s. Like you buy it wholesale. You buy it.
All that considered, how full does this make your bottle, Courtney?
I struggle. I always know this question is coming, and this one is very hard for me because I don't know. Like it makes it pretty full. I'll put it that way. I'm gonna have to give it a grade. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a B, and the reason why is I enjoyed the idea that we were going to explore morally gray characters in this place that is two things at once. I really enjoyed the fact that we got the beautiful set decoration, the beautiful design, the beautiful lighting, obviously all of the hard work and the craft that paid off in this particular film. But it is imperfect. It is an imperfect, ambitious thing that happened in this movie. I guess I just want to give it a little bit more credit for the ambitious, difficult thing that it was. I really want great things for it. I want it to find its cult following. I'm hoping it will. But yeah, I think a solid B is where I land this one.
I feel the same way that you do. I have such love for it.
Mm-hmm.
I do want people to see this movie. I do think that it was criminally missed the first time around.
Yeah.
I really love the thought that went into every creative choice. I loved the care and attention to detail, from the script to the production design to the casting. I love what the cast brought to the table. They really gelled as an ensemble. So it had all the ingredients for a true cinematic feast. And that's what I love about it, because it was so unique, because it was bold, because it wanted to try something. Did it quite get there? Not quite, as we've covered. All these things considered, I think that I would give it a B as well.
Nice. Yeah. I just want more people to find it.
Me too. And I am, we always say this, I can't wait to see what's next from you. But what is next from Drew Goddard?
Oh.
This shit will probably get cut, but I'm just genuinely curious.
I don't know. Yeah. What is he doing? I have no idea what he's doing.
Let's look it up.
Let's find out.
Drew Goddard. Untitled Nate Bargatze Project. It's a TV movie.
Oh. Okay. Also, just as a sidebar, this is not what I was expecting Drew Goddard to look like. It's neither here nor there. Please cut that. But it's not what I anticipated.
The other thing that we'll probably cut is when I was watching the behind the scenes, it really kind of warmed my heart because he kind of seemed like the kind of filmmaker that I aspire to be. What I mean by that is, like, yes, the obsessive attention to detail, all of these documents that he brought to set about like the color choices and everything, but he also allowed the actors to play, which I appreciate. Yeah. And also his general demeanor was kind of like lead from behind.
Nice.
Like he didn't have that like, I know exactly what I'm doing and exactly what I want. He didn't have that air that Fincher maybe had in the footage that we checked out during our coverage of Panic Room. And I like that leadership style. I think nice. it really yields unique results.
Absolutely. I think that freedom to just kind of at least, give people the opportunity to mold or shape things. Because I did read that like Cynthia Erivo kind of helped with that particular monologue that she gives, that epic monologue. So I'm glad it seems like he's allowing people to explore. I definitely want to see what's next for him because I feel like he's got it. Kid's got it.
Yeah. He has a vision and a voice for sure.
Absolutely.
And with that, this has been Bottle Episodes. If you've enjoyed being on lockdown with us, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you have an idea for a bottle episode from television history that we should cover, or if you're trapped in a single primary location and need to send a distress call, email podcastbottleepisodes@gmail.com. That's podcastbottleepisodes@gmail.com. Say bye-bye, Courtney.
Goodbye, everybody.